connected. And yeah, welcome. A virtual welcome to all of you. I see some friends in the audience.
Hello.
Hello, Mohammed. Yeah, good afternoon to all of you. Fabrizio Rosso, I am Deputy Executive Secretary of the EuFMD. And yeah, before we start the meeting, I would like to provide you some background of the activities and introduce the moderators and chair of the session, of the different sessions. So, well, first of all, thank you for your availability in attending this workshop. The workshop, the virtual workshop, is actually connected and part of the EuFMD open session that was organized this year in virtual setting with 4 live sessions that were held in December. And the general scope of the open session is actually to bring together the international scientific community and shared progress and results of research on FMD, including surveillance, control, prevention, diagnosis, impact, risk assessment, and another aspect. And with the Open Session 20, that was organized as a special edition in virtual format, and also considering the extended mandate of the EuFMD to cover also similar transboundary animal diseases in its program, also a wider scope was given to the open session with the focus that was decided to be on discussing on how to better forecast fast disease spread. And with fast disease, we mean FMD and similar transboundary animal diseases. So PPR, Capripox, Rift Valley fever, to reflect on improved targeted surveillance and control measures, how to best communicate the risk and to protect livestock related business and livelihood. And in connection with the different themes that were proposed in the Open Session 20, we thought of organizing a series of workshops to discuss actually with a restricted number of participants. I would better say with the experts on specific issues, well, different aspects that were actually covered in the 4 sessions of the Open Session 20. And for this reason, we thought of organizing this workshop, and it is aimed really to be not a long workshop, but very focused workshop on on animal mobility. And this is actually very much also connected to the EuFMD program, which has the aim of identifying, in particularly in the European neighborhood, of risk hotspots, considering particularly the animal mobility. So as I said, special attention on the Open Session 2020 was reserved to animal mobility, and questions related to how and where the disruption in the production and the price variation can affect the animal mobility, and with providing changes in movement partners, how such movement partners changes can be regularly monitored and forecasted, and also what type of training methodologies and partnership can be implemented to improve skills and tools to collect and analyze the risk information such as animal movement and market prices. So as I said, to try to build on the presentation and preliminary discussion that we had during the first session in December, we thought of having this group of experts together and to work for 1 hour and a half, a couple of hours, on or to, let's say, to reflect on how to better identify the key drivers of animal mobility, considering the environmental aspect, commercial, economic, social factors, and how digital innovation can assist in collecting the information, to reflect on strengths and limitations of the existing methodologies and tools for risk mapping and forecasting, and also on areas of current research or where the research should be focused, and also to define what are the challenges and opportunities in the application of the capacity development initiatives. So discuss on possible improved modality and format of the capacity building initiatives, the audience, the field application, and how to better integrate the trainings into the national continuing program development. As well as, to reflect on the possibility to establish a multidisciplinary community of practice for, such as the a way to have the opportunity to regularly meet with experts in this field, in this sector. So different experts and institutes have been contacted, and again, thank you for having accepted to attend this workshop. I also would like to thank David Redding, who has accepted to chair the whole workshop. David is a Sir Henry Dale Research Fellow and at the Zoological Society in London, and also an honorary senior research fellow at the University College of London. And his research currently focuses on understanding links between the major drivers of global environment change and outbreaks of wildlife-borne diseases in human populations. And I also would like to thank, with this introduction to the workshop, I would like to thank particularly Andrea Polloni, Cecile Squazzoni, and Barbara Wieland for having accepted to moderate the different working groups that will be proposed during the workshop. And also, I would like to thank Andrea, Paolo, and Etienne for their work on the preparation of the workshop, and particularly, I would say, Etienne for his hard work in putting all the material and the workshop together. And finally, of course, our operational team that you have probably from whom you have probably received several instructions, Silvia, Helena, Ludovica, and Filippo, for the assistance that we have received in the organization of the event. So with this brief introduction, I hope that the scope is clear, and there will be probably the possibility during also the working group activities to in the 3 groups that are proposed to better focus, to focus more on the aspect that I have just mentioned, on the drivers, methodologies, and tools for risk mapping and capacity development initiatives. And with this, I would like to hand it over to our chair, David Redding. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Fabrizio. I am very excited to hear where we get to today. Certainly, I think it's really a really vital part of understanding sort of zoonotic disease risk is understanding livestock mobility, and sort of fits in with some of my work on Rift Valley fever, and some more sort of general work where I'm trying to understand how livestock risk is important across diseases. So I'm personally very excited to hear where we're going. So for the next 20 minutes, we have a set of 3 technical presentations. And so our first speaker is Dr. Etienne Chavannes, whose talk is on the integration of livestock mobility in risk assessment and forecasting. So hopefully Etienne is ready.
Yes, thank you very much, David and Fabrizio. I hope you can see my screen. So first, I'd like to apologize because Claudia Pitilio is unfortunately not able to join us today, and the initial presentation that should have focused on drivers of livestock mobility and data sources has been thus cancelled. But we've put together with Fabrizio a short presentation that hopefully will be helpful in setting the scene for the working group topic 1. That presentation would be quite short and would bring an overview of the EuFMD activities in the European neighborhood towards the integration of livestock mobility in risk assessment and forecasting activities. Very briefly, so as Fabrizio mentioned, as part of the EuFMD work plan, and especially into the pillar 2 of our work plan, which is called risk reduction, since 2016, we are collaborating with CIRAD and especially the research unit ASTRA, with Andrea Poloni and Cécile Scorzoni being here present. And we, through this collaboration, we provide support to the national veterinary services of the European neighborhood to improve their capacity on risk analysis through training and workshop. And I believe Cécile, in the 3rd technical presentation, would focus on that. The methodology that is used through those capacity building activities is the special qualitative risk assessment methodology, which integrates animal mobility along with other risk factors, acknowledging the fact that animal mobility, movement of live animals and animal products are major risk factors for fast disease spread. This methodology has been applied to a large variety of diseases, such as foot and mouth disease, of course, but PPR, Rift Valley fever, lumpy skin diseases, and is particularly relevant in context where data is scarce, such as in the European neighborhood. Ultimately, this activity allows the optimization of veterinary services resources for improved surveillance and control of fast diseases, but also the sharing of updated information at regional level. This activity relies on national experts, and we are really happy to have those experts into the audience today. Well, some of them. And those national experts are progressively trained over the years to collect, handle, analyze, and map livestock flows to identify the associated risk for disease introduction and spread. So basically, but practically, the countries have produced national risk maps of fast disease introduction and spread, either at provincial or district level, including some of the risk information below, such as environmental features, livestock in human densities, the presence of major of quarantine post, border post, livestock markets, slaughterhouses, imputing into their maps the accessibility as well, outcomes of surveillance and control activities, including vaccination coverage in the country itself and in its neighbors, but also, and this is why we are here today, also integrating transboundary and national livestock mobility data. The veterinary services of the 17 countries that are now involved in that training program are regularly updating their maps every 6 to 12 months as data is getting more and more available, but also identifying the major data gaps and planning the future activities to be carried out to address those gaps within the documents that are provided to them and that we call logbooks. So this activity provides the framework for an improved data collection on livestock mobility, and this is made possible through technical expertise provided by CIRAD in the design of animal mobility surveys in selected countries, but also through the financial support to support the implementation of those field surveys to collect livestock mobility data at various points of the livestock mobility network. The provision of collaborative tools and training to facilitate digital data collection, data visualization and sharing. The regional aspect or the regional approach to this activity is very central, and facilitate data collection and sharing through agreement between countries, through statement of intention or invitation of regional networks in those trainings. And of course, as I said previously, we heavily rely on a team of national focal points to follow up this activity in the field and to liaise with the ministries to reach the existing national data. However, and despite all those activities and since 2016 that the activities are being carried out in the European neighborhood, our knowledge on livestock mobility or mobilities in the region of interest remains incomplete. Veterinary services are mostly dealing with formal data on formal livestock trade, dealing with aggregated data with little information on the dynamics of livestock mobility within their territories. And we have also limited information on what could be the drivers of livestock mobility. So this is why we are very much looking forward of having that discussion in topic 1 in particular, as we all wish to move from description to forecasting or prediction, and a clear understanding of what could be the drivers of livestock mobility is paramount. Very briefly, we, as an attempt to understand what were the, let's say, the economic factors that were driving cross-border trade in the Transcaucasus region, the EuFMD has collaborated with CIRAD to do a preliminary retrospective study within the Transcaucasus region to explore the interplay between official and cross-border livestock trade and price variation. So in that specific study, data was used. Retrospective data was used from publicly available data sets from the International Trade Center, from FAO STAT database, and we also look at the FMD situation in the country within that period. So very briefly, and Andrea and Cécile could comment a little bit more on that study if needed later on, but together with a review of the livestock value chain in that region, this study enabled us to explore the trade connection between the countries, but also the relationship between price variation and trade trends within each of the 5 countries. This preliminary study really highlighted the big gap in publicly available data for the countries, which inhibit the conduction of further analysis. However, one of the recommendations of that preliminary study was really to collect more information on the price of need more information on legal and illegal cross-border trade within that region to have a better insight into the potential link that could be between price variation, trade of live cattle, and spread of transboundary animal diseases in the region. So having that said, and I hope that this short presentation really help you understand what are the current activities that are carried out with CIAD and within the EuFMD work program, and what are the main challenges that we are facing, and the question that we are asking to ourselves. So we are very much looking forward to having the discussion with you experts and try to start the discussion on the identification of drivers of livestock mobility in low and middle income countries. What could be the data type, data source to be prioritized? What are the main challenges in collecting and accessing that data, and opportunities to overcome those data gaps? And as Fabrizio said, there is a transversal question about benefits and priorities for the establishment of a multidisciplinary community of practice. That community of practice that would continue to reflect on the key 3 topics of this workshop. Thank you very much for this attention, and now I leave the floor to David.
Okay, thanks very much, Etienne. We'll move straight on there to the next technical presentation, which is going to be Dr. Andrea Apolloni, talking about network indicators for livestock mobility and integration in surveillance and control strategies.
Andrea, sorry, I think you're muted. Please.
I noticed. So I'm sharing my screen, I suppose. I hope everybody can see it. Okay, so Etienne has already said a lot about mobility, and so I try to skip some of the parts. The important point is that mobility is considered one of the risk factors for introduction and diffusion of emergent or re-emergent animal diseases. It becomes important to understand the livestock mobility patterns, because as animal moves, so does the virus. And so we can understand what are the areas that should be prioritized for control and surveillance, but also understand, having an idea of the extent of an epidemic when it can start. So because of this, the activity on livestock mobility become one of the most important activity when dealing with the risk. If we have a good knowledge of the mobility network, we can answer many questions, like identify what is the role of different locations in our country, estimate the possible extension of epidemic, and also the arrival time of the disease. And also for each location, assess the risk of the introduction of a disease from abroad or from other regions in the same country, and also the role that they play in developing, disseminating the virus or the pathogens. Once veterinarian services or other competent body can have this information, they could optimize the resources for the disease and for the control and surveillance of different diseases. However, mobility, it's a very complex phenomenon. It involves many scales, many different subjects and fields, from sociology, economics, and the different drivers beyond the mobility is something that will be dealt mostly in topic 1. But what is important when dealing with mobility is to try to quantify this mobility. How can we quantify mobility? How can we identify area to prioritize? So because of this, we usually apply a complex network approach. For those who don't know anything about complex network, you should know that in the late of the 90s, begin of 2000, there has been an explosion in the science in the context of complex network. And from my side, there was real huge mathematical research, physics research about the characteristic of networks. On the other one, there were application of network measure and network approaches to many systems. The basic idea of a complex network is just a representation, is a framework to represent a complex system where nodes are some interacting units and links represented there is an interaction between the different parts of this system. What made so important the complex network approach were the discovery made at the end of the 20th century. The first one was about the preferential attachment. That is, the distribution of links, the distribution of connection is not homogeneous, but there are some nodes that attract more than other nodes. And another important phenomenon was the small world phenomena, otherwise known as the 6-degree experiment, where that according to the distribution of the connection between nodes, we can have a smaller world, and then because of this, we can have a speed up of the diffusion processes. Due to the heterogeneities in the network of the different nodes, of the characteristic of the different nodes, there has been introduced new measure, what is called the centrality measure. I will be back on this point in a few, that characterize each node, in particular they characterize the position of a node in a specific network. And due to the heterogeneities, we can see that certain nodes can play a pivotal role in the diffusion of the disease compared to other ones. So the main idea is to introduce, to use livestock mobility as a risk factor, is to pass by a complex network approach that allows to assess the heterogeneities of the different locations in our network, both for the exposure and also for the diffusion of a particular disease. Just to give an idea, usually how we pass from mobility to a risk factor. First of all, we start collecting data using mobility survey or doing some bibliography that usually contain information about origin and destination of the movement, and sometimes also with what species are moved and the volume of animals that have been moved. These information are collected in terms of origin destination tables, as we can see here, where each line corresponds to a movement between two locations with specific characteristics. And from this one, if we geolocalize our nodes, we can draw a representation of this complex network where nodes represent villages, cities, premises, depending on the particular question that we are studying, and links can be characterized also by the number of animals that are moved, the species involved, but also the type of transportation. From this one, we can estimate some centrality measure, and so we can elicit those nodes that are most important. If we are able to, if we are in the case in which there is a huge heterogeneity, we can use this information to target some nodes for specific action. But the most important thing is that this is one of the risk factors and should be combined with other risk factors to have a risk map that includes not only the mobility factor, but also other factors that are considered important for the transmission and diffusion of the disease. Like, for example, if you consider vector-borne disease, another risk factor could be the distribution of vectors in the area. This is a short list, as you can see, of centrality measures. Centrality measures are estimated for each node. In particular, the first one are the in degree and the out degree that correspond to the connection towards or from a node toward other nodes. This is important to understand the exposure of a certain location to the disease by the connection to other location. Another important, or not important, but widely used centrality measure is the betweenness that give us the information of how central is a node in the network. So what is the probability that some flow of animal could pass by this location? And another important measure is the closeness that tells me how far I'm from the other node. So how soon a disease could reach me if this happens. Then we can consider also some global measure of the network that give us some information mostly on how fast a disease can spread through the network. Like, for example, the diameter that counts the longest distance following the links between nodes. And another important measure is the connectedness. Is this network a unique block or there are different blocks? These are some information that is being included in the risk analysis, but it's not an exhaustive list. And actually, this is one of the points of this workshop. There are some points that we should address. I don't know if we could address all of this in this workshop, but as a starting point, now we use, for building our network, some table of origin, destination, movement. But maybe this is the wrong approach. Maybe there are other methods that are available that could help us to better understand the role of mobility in the diffusion. Second, and this is the second point, other point is how can I collect information about movement? What are the data sources except mobility services, the mobility service? We used to differentiate area using some centrality measure. This, what I showed you before were some common one, but are there any other measure that could be more important, more useful, more effective in assessing the risk of being touched by a disease or diffusing a disease? And also, these are static and structural measure of the network. However, there is, in order to better understand the evolution of disease, we should run a simulation using some stochastic simulation to predict the epidemic's evolution. Is there a way to effectively incorporating this in the analysis so veterinarian services could use for developing network of control and surveillance? And finally, the last question is, we have considered static representation of the network. However, network changing times all over the time. What we can use, or what predictors can be used from other study to better understand the importance of specific nodes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Andrea. We're running about 10 minutes behind, but I think that's okay. I think we're quite flexible. So the next technical presentation is by Dr. Squarzoni Dior, and that's training on risk mapping and implementing for national animal health.
Thank you. So I will present you the methodology that we use on training on risk mapping and implementation regional strategy and national animal health strategy. So the background and the approach, the integrated approach, is to develop a framework with to implement and improve surveillance and control of transboundary animal disease in countries with limited resources and scarce data. And the main objective is to develop a participative qualitative risk assessment framework to support animal health services and build their own surveillance and control strategy, and to develop knowledge on risk assessment, risk mapping, risk-based surveillance, and of course on animal mobility and analysis of data of animal mobility, to support field activities like a survey on animal mobility or surveillance control protocols, to detect hotspots for risk of introduction and risk of spread. And these different activities were developing through a regional training action workshop So it's a regional training action program for animal health services or sanitary agencies at the national level and regional level. And we are developing this framework over 25 countries. So the principle is to develop a hybrid program, like a mixed with field activities and training, regional training session. So you can see in this picture the different workshops held since 2013-2020, with each year some survey, field activities, and regional training workshop. We use each year regional workshop to implement a regional network between experts, national experts, and to have a regional risk assessment. So this film, you can see different workshops. So before COVID, the coronavirus, we can had some training session, for example, in Montpellier or in Rome, and this different workshop will be held with a beginner level or intermediate level and expert level. So we define a specific learning objective regarding the expert and regarding the country. And this year we are developing ADAPT with the sanitary situation, with virtual workshop, and developing a framework with induction phase with 3 weeks, and after a virtual training with a specific scheme with 6 sessions, for example, during 12 days. And you can see the different workshops, and we have more than this picture, held with a different country. And for each event, it's a framework adapt to the regional context and the regional priority of these countries. So we are using and develop a pedagogical toolkit, a specific scientific toolkit. This toolkit are dedicated to this integrated method, and all resources like PDF, video lesson, tutorials, virtual data, and package, a manual, handbook. All the resources, pedagogical resources, are integrated in a website and a specific toolkit, and we have them both in English and French. And people and participants can use the handbook, use a specific bibliographic reference, of course, and video lesson, and of course we can support them with the induction phase and specific tutorial and case study, for example, case study based on Tunisia study. And this online course now with coronavirus will be support all training with the pedagogical toolkit and the video with the expert. For each training session, we are developing a regional approach. So we can see with the presentation of Andrea that it will be very important to have a regional approach to develop a control strategy or vaccination strategy with all the country in the region. And of course, to develop regional risk assessment and validated this conclusion and result, and to develop a regional consensus between experts in the same session and in the same training. In conclusion, this hybrid training programs are organized with a regional session with specific learning objective and expect outcomes. At the end of this, of each training, we are expected some specific outcomes like national risk map updated, like national roadmaps. And after the training, so the country have to collect new data and to centralize, analyze the data to update the risk map. We are implementing the following meeting with FAO and EuFMD expert and CIRAD expert to update data and to support the country and the expert. And the specific risk map will be used to improve risk-based surveillance and control, risk-based control protocols. And with this specific shame and framework, we can create a regional network between countries, between experts from vet services, from laboratory, from sanitary agencies, and develop a specific mind and support to integrate surveillance and control in the region or sub-region. Voilà. And knowledge for the partners.
Okay, thanks very much. So hopefully that's given everyone some background on what we're going to be talking about in the topic. So we'll be moving on to the parallel working group sessions, and I think you'll be all assigned to those sessions.
Yes, we will now be probably split. Well, we will be split in the 3 sessions, and I hope you can see on the screen the 3 groups that will be moderated. Well, group 1 by Paolo Motta, David Redding, and myself. Group 2 by Andrea Polloni and Beatriz Vidondo. And apologies, Beatriz, I didn't actually mention you at the beginning of the workshop. And group 3 by Cecile Squarzoni and Barbara Wieland. So I think that we have half an hour of working together, and then we can reconvene in the plenary.
Some of the conclusions from each of the working groups. So what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes or so is to get a brief overview of what each of the groups concluded, and then try and have a conversation about each of these and how we can actually move towards tools and methodologies and putting them into practice. So do we have who's going to be talking from group 1? Is that you, Fabrizio?
Yes, I will try to summarize the discussion, but please, David, Paolo, and all the participants to group 1, then if I miss anything, please add. And this is really intended to have a really wider discussion with the rest of the participants. So we focus our discussion on understanding what are the drivers and type of information that should be collected to inform risk assessor on possible risk of spread of transboundary animal diseases. And our first one of the main points that we discuss is actually to really define the objective and the different scale of possible animal movement drivers, or let's say the different scale of our movement, of different scale of animal movement and related drivers. And we mentioned that possible drivers for animal movement can be at the more local level, the environmental, social, and cultural reasons, and for that probably also different resolutions of information is needed in comparison to more long distance movement, where probably the supply chain and the economic drivers are more important, and probably also the stakeholders involved are also different. That the one is more, the farmers at the local level. The other one are traders that trade the animals of more distance level. And so that that would it's useful to have this distinction, also to look at into the data that we need to look at and the different level of resolutions. And of course, those has to be considered. These two categories have to be considered in relation to the different objectives, whether are more at local level to perhaps define surveillance and control measures, or more at the regional level to more focus on understanding really the risk and risk forecasting of movements of diseases. With regards to these two big category of animal movements that and related drivers that we were considering, we were also reflecting on the need well, we were reflecting on the that probably a specific well, that each region has a different characteristic. So research studies are really needed in different contexts to connect the movement, the local and more large scale, the movements with the drivers, as well as the needs of develop more or investing more in simulation models to reduce the level of uncertainty or data gaps. And with this regards, in particular to the the different sources of information that can be used for feeding the models, we mentioned particularly the satellite options to better collect information on the factors more related to the environmental aspects or environmental drivers of animal movement, and other informations such as, for example, the land ownership that for example in an African context might be relevant or to forecast movement of animals, or the development of apps or technologies that can facilitate either like the collection of information or the representations of information into the mapping systems. And we heard also the some country experiences from participants of our in our group. This is at least what and I was discussing during the break with Paolo, but please, Paolo and all the colleagues, add if I missed anything or didn't describe appropriately.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that did a good job of summarizing a bit of a meandering chat that we had. For the next topic moderator, we've got two different people. I don't know who's going to, is it Andreas? That looks like he's took his microphone off. So we're talking about strengths and limitations of integrating network indicators.
Yeah, as Fabrizio, I'm going to start something, but then anybody is welcome to intervene and to add some point. I'm just, sorry, a few seconds, I'm looking for some notes that I've taken, so it will be easier to discuss. So we had quite a fruitful discussion, and the first point that we try to address is like some of the network measures that have been used till now. What are the strength limitation, and are there any?
I'm sorry, but I think the screen is showing not the correct doc.
Okay.
Maybe you swap documents.
Okay, I'm getting lost because I have too many documents open, so I don't know which one I'm.
Maybe there's no need to share a document.
Okay, but I try so in order not to lose. So we have a discussion about network measure that could be useful in risk analysis, and okay, I found it. And one of the points was there are a lot of measures, but maybe we don't need all these measures. Sometimes because they are highly correlated among them, and sometimes because they are difficult to communicate, or you can infer some information from other measures. One of the points, instead of focusing on the measure to use, is the ability of sampling the network, because sometimes we can come up with a value for the degree or the bitwiness. But the data that we have, they are not quite good to provide a reliable representation, and so the measure is not useful at all. So this was one of the points that should be considered. And other point that came up was something like the measure that we are going to use to assess the risk should depend on the disease. This has an impact also on the temporal dynamics of the network. So depending on if we are considering a fast disease or a slow disease, the measure of the network, the temporal measure of the network could have an impact, in particular on the epidemic threshold. And this represents a limitation, so there is no measure that we can use for all the disease, but we have really to understand how the two dynamics of the network and the disease are compared one to the other one. One of the gaps that has been transversal to most of the discussion has been about data gaps and the reconstruction of the network. As we notice, some cannot retrieve data easily, and in countries where disease have a higher impact, there are more data available or difficult to retrieve. And so what happens is that the disease arrives, and then you discover too late the propagation of the disease. While in some other countries, there are, mostly Europe, and there are some data, high detailed data, and so you can create optimal surveillance system, but they are actually less prone to disease spreading. The second question that we tried to address was what are current area of research and how some information from this current area of research could be transmitted to veterinarian services. And we can broadly find three big areas. One about the network, this network structure. So what is the effect of rewiring network, rewiring a link? So instead of having a link between a node A and node B, a link between a node A and a node C. And this rewiring is mostly, it could be related to farmer decision. Another effect is the multi-layer network. So the structure of the network and the pattern of diffusion of the disease could be the result of combination of different networks of interaction. This was one first block. A second block was something about network reconstruction and also disease reconstruction. So sometimes we have high resolution data, very specific, but and we can build some algorithm for reconstructing the network. But the question is, do we really need all these high detail, high precision data for assessing the risk, for studying the diffusion of the dynamics? One of the approach on another study that is going on is something how to use machine learning to link disease to movement. And the third question is something like, we have a lot of data, we start having a lot of data, how this huge amount of data could tell something different from what veterinarian experience is already telling us. So this is one of the points. At the end, we try to discuss what are the available tools and packages. Here we have a list on packages that we can use that are already be developed either in R, either in Python, or there is the software GFI. And we were discussing how to share. One of the proposition that we had was to GitHub, and then at that point we end up the time, so we couldn't continue. I don't know if I covered all the questions, but feel free to add.
Okay, if we're done there, does anyone else from topic 2 want to contribute, or should we move on? Okay. Okay, so we've got topic 3, which is sort of focused on capacity building and mentoring and how to maximize impact. So do I have a volunteer from one of the two moderators?
Yeah, hi, sorry, that would be me. Hi, it's Barbara here. I'm just trying to share my screen, and it should be, you should be seeing it now. So I'll be briefly reporting back from group 3, what we have been discussing. And let's see if that works. Okay. So our task was to think about challenges and opportunities in the application of capacity development initiatives for risk mapping with National Animal Health Services, and we also tried to reflect on what that would mean for a multidisciplinary community of practice. So we tried to touch on this as well. So we had 4 questions to look at or to discuss. That was basically looking at what's the modality and format of current training approaches, and in what context, and what are the lessons, the audience, and how thinking about how to improve the trainee selection, thinking about field application, how does that look like in realities, trying to think of challenges and lessons learned. And then also we had the pointer to think about how to better integrate trainings into national CPD programs in the veterinary domain. So we completed this table as was sort of given at the beginning of the workshop, where we very quickly found out, okay, everything depends on the objectives of a training, and there are different training streams related to getting the animal mobility data and how to integrate them into risk assessment and risk analysis, how to use the tools that are needed for that, especially GIS tools, but just in general around data collection, data management, how that then informs risk-based surveillance and control programs. So these are all very different topics that need different trainings, as has already been outlined in Cecile's presentation before. So we try to sort of see what is going on at the moment, how, based on experience, how much time the different sessions takes, and we concluded some sessions are longer and benefited from having an iterative process where there would be sort of follow-up in a regular basis. Also, some of the topics would have different level trainings, like entry level, but then also more advanced courses. And currently, a lot of the trainings would be available as a form of, in a hybrid form, where there would be digital tools like e-learning platforms available. But the conclusion was probably most of these trainings would profit to have some sort of face-to-face interaction. In terms of audience, we also tried to map that out and sort of could see that really staff working in official veterinary services and Department of Veterinary Services are key to be involved in all of those. But there are some trainings that also have a stronger component to integrate field vets or slaughterhouse vets, for example, for the data collection. But also others would be good to include decision makers as well. And for some of the trainings, also looking at the coordinators who control the major control programs such as PPR, FMD, and etc. So therefore, in terms of application, there is a suite of tools available with protocols, SOPs on how to do things, questionnaire tools are there, and also training for training of trainers, which allows to increase the scope of the trainings. But I think what's most important for the discussion here is some of the comments and recommendations, sort of thinking about the challenges. I think one of the key challenges is the high turnover of staff that we see, especially in veterinary services in many places. So you often train people, and once they are well trained, they move on to greener pastures. So then it's always the thing, can there be a system be put in place that sort of ensures that the successors are trained by the people that held the position before, which isn't always very successful in my experiences. But then could also be sort of having the certificates for the different training courses that has been done, which might actually then help to get the job in the DVS or something, so that actually people start joining the trainings even before they maybe work in the key positions. There was also discussions about how that could then be linked to a CPD. So, and for a CPD, I think definitely the topics are very relevant to be included in CPD programs. And there too, the key challenge would be that each country has a different CPD system. So there it will be important on a case-to-case scenario, basically, like liaise, for example, with the national training centers that provide the CPD trainings in each countries, checking how the credits are in the different countries, and according to country system, provide or sort of give the credits for the training courses. Another sort of area to address this high turnover of staff or having a loss in the capacity that is being built or has been built in the past could be that some of these things are reflected in the job descriptions of DVS staff, so that you could just start to advocating for that, so that actually people really need to get the trainings in order to do their job, staff. We also identified some topics that would be very conducive in a community of practice setting, and especially related to ongoing problems people face with data collection, with data management. Sort of that's normally on that, these are key areas. And it's also important that people working on that they have maybe a sort of a support network. And then actually maybe I'll just jump the next point and come back to that later. And also linked to that community of practice could be that the trainees that are part of a training course in a batch, that they have a platform to continue to remain in touch, and also sort of like this, trying to keep at least some sort of a momentum. I know it's often a bit optimistic, but if people actually have to work on these things on a daily basis, that is possible. Looking at systems, or that's also sort of what is already being trialed, that former trainees are involved in the training of new staff, which is a really good way to pass on hands-on experience. And another great opportunity is the online twinning. And especially it would be recommended for maybe new staff coming into a system to enroll in such online twinning systems. And then in terms of selection of trainees, so it really depends on the skills and their roles, and the best would be to be in touch with the DVS of the respective countries to get their support in the selection of trainees. And for measuring training impact, so currently the system that's in place now seems to work very well, in that indicators were developed based on the training objectives of the different training modules, which allow to monitor and quantify the impact of the trainings also over time, and also that there are global indicators for the twinning programs that are sort of being set up or are in place in some places. Yeah, so I think that was it from our side. If there are any other points to add from the others of the group, please do so. Thank you.
I would have a quick question if we have time, David, I'm not sure, or Fabrizio.
Yes, we certainly do. We've got some time, and I wanted to just open everything up to some general questions and comments.
Very quickly, Barbara. So, what are the reasons for the high turnover of staff? Is it just because of temporary employment, or do you know anything?
No, well, in my experience, it is often when people that they get better opportunities. I think it's less a problem in the European system. But so it depends, but especially in the systems where I have been working, for example, this has been a major problem. That you do have staff and they get training, they get trained, and then they find better opportunities, which still means you build the capacity of the country, but maybe not exactly in the position where you need it. So I think it's something to keep in mind, and that's, as you say, in some countries that might not really be an issue. So this is also very country specific.
Okay, that's great. So yeah, so what I wanted to do is just open up whether people have got any other questions or anything they want to ask from one group to another, and just to sort of reiterate some of these points that we've been talking about. So thinking about using technology, sort of the satellite data, or some of the kind of modern ways of collecting data. So things like creating apps or kind of common training platforms or common data input. And then also thinking about with the networks, trying to work out, again, we've got something coming up in all of these, which is kind of this idea of data gaps and how we fill them, and how perhaps we think about data standards. And so they were in the network group, were talking about how you choose particular methods, whether there's redundancy in those methods. So talked a bit about machine learning, and I think this is another good point here is how we bring a sort of other technology into this. You know, do we want to rely on the way things have been done before? Can we use kind of modern computational techniques? And then with the training, we've just had that one, but again, thinking about how we can kind of complement these all together, thinking about what training needs to be done for what are the core skills that are needed. So how do we fill data gaps? And I guess one of the things, it's sort of coming back to the main point of this is thinking about risk maps and forecasts. I was thinking about who are the audiences for these risk maps and these forecasts. Are we thinking again about scale? How are they going to be delivered to local level, to regional level? So I guess it's just whether people have got any points around these topics that they want to ask or share, or yes. So I'll open the floor again for any further comments.
Can I have a comment, please?
Of course, please.
Just about data gap. What you propose is very much perspectives there from now, how we collect information, but are there really data gap? There's a lot of data, but on paper formats everywhere in Africa in different formats collected for different purposes. And the question is that there's no effort from government level, because or international institutions to fund the transcript of this paper for data into a digital electronic database that can be used. As it is right now, we're working in Uganda for doing that. We've done it. We're analyzing it currently now. I know that we are on a project to fund a similar thing in Malawi. But if there is data in the different Ministry of Agriculture, I don't know the quality. We don't know the quality, but we always assume the quality is bad, but we don't really know. Maybe it's very good and it's lost. So the question is, rather than spending quite a lot of money on developing tools that we don't know is going to succeed because there's a technology uptake and it's quite costly sometimes, why not try to see the possibility of collecting and transcripting this data already existing, but they're on paper format into a digital information that can be used. Yes, it's historical, but at least it's giving us a step forward in terms of knowing where we are, where we've been, and then based on that knowledge, design the system that will be useful for the future, rather than scratch and do everything with our preconception of the system from European or North American behavior or knowledge.
Okay, thanks. It's a really great point. Does anyone else want to bring up any other points?
Yeah, and actually that was my question to the group too, because Andrea, I think you mentioned the network metrics to be used to describe the animal movements, if I understood. But my question is how actually complex should be those information to be able to describe the network and you know how much in depth it is needed to go into the for describing the animal network within a country, but probably the question is already be answered by the previous speaker, by Thibault.
I don't have an answer. I try to reconnect to everything that has been discussed to topic 2 and Thibault. I think a couple of years ago there was this paper by Cow about making an argument why collecting data in developing country on mobility, and actually what he proposed as a measure was degree, was simply using the degree, so it's just the number of links. And then what you have to understand is for what are the limitations behind this this network. So you don't need maybe very high complicated measure. Actually, this was one of the objects at the end of our discuss. We have not the least complex measure, and sometimes they gave you the same information. More important is actually more than focusing on the measure, focusing on the reconstructing the network, or being reliable that being assured that the information that you have on the network can give you a reliable picture of what's going on in your in the country for a specific time and for a specific disease. This is something like the take-home message. Starting from this, you can choose a better network, a network measure. This was something like the take-home message, and there are a lot. And the application depends on the data that you have, both in space, both in time, both in the company, in the completeness of the network representation. Maybe there is a point that I didn't present in the introduction talk, and also we haven't discussed too much during the workshop, is that we always take a location and we say, oh, degree 5, degree 4, degree 3. But actually this is less than half of the story, because we don't know if this degree 5 is the only one that has degree 5, or there are other 100, or there are other 20,000 nodes that they have the same degree. And so the distribution could be different, and what we call the hub or hotspot could be simply generated randomly. And again, this is another argument to say you have to focus more on having a reliable picture of the network than creating new complex measure for the network itself.
Okay, I mean, I think, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No, I just from the chat, Sana was indicating that the most important thing, wait, now it's moving. Yeah, that there's no animal movements from countries like in many countries in Africa. And yeah, the question is what is needed so that this happens? Is just a funding, is just a resources problem? Or is it also an acceptance problem?
If I can just make a few comments, I guess, on a few different aspects. One is that we know that a lot of the movement permitting data does exist in paper form, and that's been mentioned by others, and it has been digitized in some countries, mostly as part of from what I can tell, mostly research projects rather than routine digitization, but maybe that's shifting now. I think that if we want to encourage more digitization to be, done on an ongoing basis, then I think that there's a huge capacity building training aspect, and so that the value of the data is recognized by the stakeholders that actually own the data. And so I think that could, improve the efforts to make that data available in more of an analyzable format. I also think that part of the needed research around this is, it's not necessarily complex research, but it's how often do we need like constantly real-time updated movement data, or are these general patterns stable enough across years that we can look at movement patterns for, say something, data that was collected 3 or 4 years ago, and be reasonably confident that the patterns today are relatively similar. And if so, then we can use more of these periodically updated movement networks, but that aren't fully real time, and feel more confident in using that for these sorts of decision making. And then I guess the final comment I'll make is we talked a lot in our group about spatial resolution, and I think that that part of it again is working with the people actually involved in management, and this could be nationally or internationally, I guess, but to try to understand at what level is risk-based surveillance or risk-based any sort of risk analysis being done. So for example, if within a given county, if you're going to go and vaccinate, you're going to vaccinate every animal in that county, then is it important from a risk-based standpoint to understand the fine scale heterogeneities of risk related to local movements within that county if you're planning on covering the whole county? And there's an argument that maybe you don't, and you're really interested in slightly larger spatial scales. So I think that's identifying the appropriate spatial scale is not only a kind of a stakeholder back and forth interface between science and policy, but I do think there's probably additional research that we can be doing to try to identify at what scales we actually see heterogeneity in movements translate to heterogeneity in disease occurrence. And one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, or at least in our group we didn't mention, but may be really relevant for this, is some of the phylogenetic data and some of the modeling that we can do to try to better link animal movement data with the disease spread data, so that we can start understanding at what scales these things actually are really important for understanding kind of the dissemination of the disease.
Just to jump on that, is that historical information can be used not in terms of to better understand the system, but also to help you design the tools you need for future collection and making something, because what Africa doesn't need is another tool that nobody's going to use. And we spend a lot of money on developing a tool that is no use because we didn't take account of something, or we didn't look at the information we needed. So what I'm saying is, using historical information is actually an evidence, not all evidence, but a part of the story that will be helpful for designing the tools that we need for future. But in order to collect this information, we need fundings in order to make it simple. And it doesn't cost that much, but it's still important it's still worth something on the field. After journeying the disease and the network and the disease, it's very important. And the scale, what we were talking about in the second group was also the importance of scale. What is obviously we are talking about the spatial scale. There's the temporal scale, as you mentioned, Kim, is that it's, what is the importance of scales? Do the information between districts is sufficient for inferring disease, for inferring movement and disease control, rather than focusing on farm to farm? Because we know that anyway, in some countries in Africa, farm to farm, it will be impossible to record.
I agree with Thibaut. I'm not a fan of a highly detailed spatial resolution for everything, because sometimes it's something like having a carpet and focusing on a thread instead of seeing all the pictures. So yeah, say Thibaut, we have to focus about scales, temporal and spatial scales when we discuss about mobility, but in general, I would say all the risk analysis. Maybe instead of going at the detail of the farm, we need administrative units of a department, or in administrative unit 3, 4, and a specific period of the year, or instead of having day by day, hour by hour movement.
I agree with you, Andrea, and I'm looking at this comment from Sana in the chat about sampling of movement data. And I think it's very easy for us to get stuck in the paradigm of kind of the European and other countries' models of where we have full, complete data, and it's important to document every single permit that exists. And I do think that sampling networks can give you enough of the architecture of the network to make the sort of analyses or inference that we're interested in. And so we need to think about what is the optimal way, how much data do we have to go to every market and sample every market, or can we do a representative number? and how much data. And we talk a lot about sampling for epidemiology, but less about how much data or what's the right strategy to actually do partial sampling from these sort of movement data to actually be able to infer the topology of the network. And so I do think that there's probably some research areas around that as well.
The thing is, I think it's a paper from Australia from Mark Stevenson that was looking at sampling networks and the impact on disease control and recommendation. I think I have a vague memory of that. There's another thing also that is important, is that we need to not forget the purpose of data collection. So for example, in Europe, we have all animal for some time. We know the movement of every cattle in Europe or every batch of pigs. Just for that is food safety traceability. It was not for epidemiology of disease control. And so we jump on that information and we do our models based on that information. So it's a byproduct of that system. The thing is, what we have here is we need to create a data set that is fit for our purpose rather than using data that is not done for our purpose. So it's a needed layer of importance. I think it's important to think about it.
Yes, Ismaila, may I add something for West and Central Africa? I think that is exactly the situation we are facing. As you know, we have some time, as someone said, information, but it's hard information. And sometimes all that information, we cannot extract that information and use it for in one model and also for the risk assessment and mapping. And why I think since 2 years ago, we developed a protocol for animal mobility and have this real-time information collected. What we need in that questionnaire is just, as we said, very simple information already exists in the sanitary laissez-passer. It's something very important that countries are using if they would like to authorize movement from locality A to locality B. And also information that existing also at country level, that's this international certificate, laissez-passer, that they are using for transhumance from one country to another country. And all that questionnaire was customized and we developed, we are using Kobo Toolbox. And also now to train vet services staff who's now at the border point, or those who was at the county delivering laissez-passer, to know how to use this online form. That online form will allow us anytime to have this updated information. That is something very important. Some of our colleagues talk about this seasonality or the movement. In Africa, sometimes you have a lot of this movement is depend of some religious celebration or many things. It's not just depending on the season, but we have also Tabaski and other religious celebration that we have a lot of movement from sometimes Niger, Mali, Senegal, and other countries. That is something we have to integrate in our thinking, and that information anytime can be used to update all the risk assessment and mapping based the situation on what we have. For me, that is something we can, of course, enhance, develop, and try to see how we can support the vet services. The just challenges we have is the connectivity. Sometimes they need to be supported. You are not the connectivity at all countries. We have to support them with some data to be able to send that forms, to update that forms, and something like that. That is, we have a lot of challenges on that, but for us to avoid to have a lot of losses regarding the data they already collected on paper, that is something existing there. If you go there, they will show you, but you cannot use it in what you would like to do in terms of assessment and mapping, something like that. Yes, that was just what I can update from the specificity here in the region. Over.
So I noticed that we're getting towards 4 o'clock now. I don't know whether we want to look to wrap up here unless anyone particularly wants to make another point. I don't know whether Fabrizio, you want to talk about any upcoming events or anything, or whether you're happy to just bring everything to a close.
Well, a comment that I have is that, well, actually, that's this kind of discussion and group expert actually is really helping a lot in identifying what are the critical aspects of animal mobility surveys, data availability, and how we can reflect this well, specifically in the EuFMD work program. We have specific aspects which are related to the FAR funds for research, so specific research according to different priorities. Risk mapping we have already mentioned, particularly in North Africa, Middle East, and West Eurasia. We have aspects related to the training management system, so the development of a tool, and actually in the plenary discussion we didn't discuss a lot on the outputs of Group 3, but I think that that's quite relevant to provide countries with a tool that can assist individuals and veterinary services in understanding what is their level of competencies in different fields, including this one, and understanding what is the desired level of that they want to achieve, and provide a tool that can help them in defining the best pathways according to the different training resources available to achieve that desired level of competencies that they want to achieve. And there are two additional aspects. The one is related to the global risk assessment, and I think it was mentioned before, the connection between phylogenetic data and animal movement, and that is quite relevant in our program. And well, you well know that the movement of viruses is well mapped, but how this is connected to the actual animal movement observations, and the digitalization, which is now a priority within FAO. And well, just now Ismaila mentioned the importance and the relevance for different countries in making the best use of the information that they already have. So well, now I more summarize the different aspects that interest our specific program. And probably one element that we didn't discuss, David, is how it is possible to maintain this group alive, and how this how we if there is a need also to to create a platform that can facilitate this regular discussion between experts.
Yeah, I think I agree. We've started on sort of breaking down some of these issues and finding some sort of common themes, and it's a question of how we then kind of look to move forward and sort of start to understand things like scales and how we can start thinking about sort of common frameworks and capacity building. And I guess a lot of this comes down to what research direction we need, and also what kind of will and funding there are to bring these kind of things together. So yeah, I don't know whether I have any particular solutions for how we would keep this going, other than either having further meetings on it, or having some kind of forum where people can discuss these things. I think there seems to be certainly appetite for further discussion.
And we can start from well, sharing the report of this meeting, and then maybe, you know, in few months' time to propose a similar event to build on the discussion that we just had. Unless there are already initiatives or opportunities for between really the different experts to meet and share this well, to have similar discussion that we had today.